Hello, my name is Eduardo Menezes. I am an intensivist doctor, and for more than 20 years I have dedicated my life to accompanying patients in decisive moments, those instants when the line between life and death seems so thin you could almost touch it with your hands. Throughout my career, I have seen medicine advance with surprising technologies. I have taken part in surgeries that once seemed impossible, and I have witnessed cases where science provided exact, cold, rational answers. But I have also witnessed situations that escape all logic, moments where even the most experienced professionals look at each other not knowing what to say. Today, I am here to share one of those stories. And it is not just any story. It is a real story, lived inside a hospital in front of colleagues, equipment, and strict protocols. A story that marked me deeply because, even surrounded by state-of-the-art machines and all the accumulated knowledge of medicine, what happened that day cannot be found in books nor in the lectures I attended in medical school. I want you, who are watching me now, to feel as if you were sitting in the armchair of my office, listening to me tell every detail directly, because what I witnessed was not just a clinical event, but a turning point in how I see life, faith, and the limits of human knowledge. It is curious to think about this, because we, as doctors, are trained from the very beginning to seek proof, to base our decisions on solid evidence. Every choice must have a technical foundation. Every step must be justified with exams, with numbers, with measurable results. But what happens when the improbable takes place right before our eyes? What happens when life insists on manifesting itself even after we have declared there was nothing left to do? Those were the very questions that began to echo in my mind during that shift. And perhaps that is why, even today, after so many years and so many patients, this memory remains alive, clear, as if it had happened yesterday. I can still hear the sounds of the ICU, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the heavy breathing of the machines, the hurried steps of the staff in the corridors. I can still see the anxious looks of the patient's family, each face carrying that cruel mixture of fear, hope, and exhaustion. And above all, I can still feel within me that same blend of science and humanity that sustains me in this profession. In sharing this account, I don't just want to tell you what I saw. I want to invite you to reflect with me. To what extent can medicine truly answer everything? And could it be that at times we must admit that there are forces greater than any treatment? This is not about denying science, far from it, but about recognizing that no matter how advanced it is, it has limits. And it is precisely at that point that the extraordinary can reveal itself. That is why I invite you to stay with this story until the end. Because if you have ever lived through or know someone who has faced a difficult medical situation, you may find here not only emotion but also a spark of hope. And who knows, at the end, you too may begin to look at life in a different way, just as I did. When medicine said it was over, I was there. And what happened afterward forever changed the way I see life and the practice of medicine itself. Those words are not exaggeration, not a narrative flourish. They are the faithful portrait of a night when a patient was declared beyond hope, when every clinical sign pointed to the most feared outcome in a hospital. I remember it as if it were now, the silence broken only by the sound of monitors, the weary look on the medical team's faces, and that sensation that overtakes everyone when there are no more protocols to follow. When science has given all it can, it was officially the end. But then, something inexplicable happened. And it is about that instant, that very second, when reality transformed before my eyes, that I will speak to you today. Before we enter the story, I need to make a very special request. This channel can only reach more people if you participate actively. I need at least 100 comments so that YouTube delivers this video to those who also need to hear this message. That's why, if you believe that miracles can happen, write down in the comments, "I believe in miracles." Your participation is essential, and if you are not yet subscribed, click the subscribe button right now. Because this is just one of the many real accounts I will share here. Stories that unite science and faith, reason and mystery, and show that life can always surprise us. Now, take a deep breath and get ready. This story is not about cold statistics or pages of medical books. It is about a human being, a patient who had a family, who carried dreams, who had a whole life marked by struggles and achievements. And it is also about us, doctors and nurses, who so often must face the fragility of existence while holding in our hands the responsibility to fight until the very last second. I clearly remember the tension that night. Each step seemed to echo through the ICU corridors as if announcing something no one wanted to hear. The patient's chart was already filled with every record, and the exams left no doubt. The condition was grave, irreversible. Everything medicine could offer had been tried. It was only a matter of time. And within me, even though I tried to keep the serenity of someone who must lead a team in the middle of the storm, I felt the weight of each tick of the clock. I looked into the family's eyes and knew there were no words that could ease such pain. No phrase of comfort seemed enough when what was at stake was the life of a loved one. But I always say, the hospital is a place where science and the unexplainable walk side by side. There are nights when we follow cold, predictable protocols, but there are also those when fate seems to play with our certainties, as if to say, you know a lot, but you don't know everything. And that is exactly what happened that night. I want you to follow me in every detail of this story because I will take you with me inside the ICU. I want you to feel the weight of the silence, the sterile smell of the environment, the coldness of the numbers flashing on the monitor. I want you to hear the metallic sound of the instruments, the beeping that marks every second, and even the restrained breathing of the professionals who stood beside me. Because only by understanding that setting will you be able to grasp the impact of what was about to happen. But I will not reveal anything yet. I want you to stay with me until the end of this video, because what happened goes beyond any scientific barrier. It is one of those stories that must be told slowly, with respect, because it is not just about medicine, but about what gives meaning to our existence, life, in its most mysterious and grand form. So have you already done your part? Have you left your comment saying, I believe in miracles? Have you subscribed to the channel so you don't miss the next stories I will share? If yes, perfect. Because now, we are ready to begin. And in the next part, I will introduce you to the patient, the person who became the protagonist of one of the most striking experiences I have ever lived. Get ready, because from here on, every detail matters. That night, the hospital routine seemed to follow the usual rhythm of an ICU. Critically ill patients, each one connected to machines that seemed to fight alongside them. But there was one room in particular that carried a different, almost heavy energy. That was where Mr. Antonio was, a 68-year-old man, father of 3 children, grandfather of 4 grandchildren, who until recently had been seen by his family as an example of strength and vitality. Mr. Antonio had been a farmer for most of his life, a simple man, but with a wisdom that cannot be learned in books. Those who spoke with him said he had a special way of talking about life, always with a touch of humor and an unshakable faith. He was one of those men who, even in hard times, could find reasons to give thanks. But his health had been weakening. A sequence of respiratory infections worsened by a chronic lung disease had left him increasingly frail. His family accompanied him in silence. His children took turns visiting, and his grandchildren, still little, drew colorful cards that were placed at the head of his bed. When he arrived at the hospital that week, his condition was already delicate. Severe shortness of breath, persistent fever, and falling oxygen saturation indicated that we needed to act quickly. The diagnosis pointed to a serious pneumonia, complicated by respiratory failure that was not responding to conventional treatments. At first, we started with broad-spectrum antibiotics, oxygen support, and, when the situation worsened, intubation became necessary. For many family members, seeing a loved one intubated is a deep shock. The image is strong, invasive, as if the person were already in another world. For us, healthcare professionals, it is a common procedure, but it never ceases to carry emotional weight. I remember seeing Dona Maria, Mr. Antonio's wife, sitting by the bed holding his hand despite all the wires and tubes surrounding him. She looked at me and asked, "Doctor, he's going to get through this, isn't he?" And that is perhaps the hardest question a doctor can hear, because behind it, there isn't just a request for information but a plea for hope. And the answer, no matter how much we want to give it firmly, depends on factors beyond our control. By then, the prognosis was not good. Lab tests showed an aggressive infection, the lungs were weakened, and Mr. Antonio's body seemed to be fighting against itself. With each passing day, the team intensified care, adjusted medications, monitored every detail, but improvement never came. In the family's heart, hope still resisted. For us doctors, concern grew heavier. As I walked the corridors, I thought about how medicine places us daily before such profound dilemmas. On one side, numbers, graphs, protocols, manuals. On the other, faces, life stories, feelings that cannot be reduced to statistics. And in Mr. Antonio's case, I didn't just see a gravely ill patient. I saw a man who had dedicated his life to hard work, who had built a united family, who carried in every wrinkle on his face a history of struggle and dignity. I knew I had to be prepared for the worst, but at the same time, there was something in the way he faced the illness that made me hesitate to accept such a definitive outcome. It was as if, even unconscious, his body transmitted a silent resistance, as if saying, "It's not over yet." At that moment, no one could have imagined what was about to happen, and that is precisely why I need you to stay with me until the end of this account. Because before the unexpected revealed itself, there was still a long night ahead, a night marked by tension, uncertainties, and difficult decisions. And it was in this heavy atmosphere, between machines, anxious looks, and silent prayers, that Mr. Antonio's story turned into something I will never forget. It was past midnight when his condition began to deteriorate quickly. The machines, which until then had maintained a steady rhythm, began to show signs of instability. The cardiac monitor, which had been displaying an irregular trace, began to fluctuate worryingly. His oxygen saturation was plummeting, even with maximum ventilator support. I was in the doctor's room when I heard the alarm go off. Those seconds between hearing the sound and running to the bedside seemed to last an eternity. The heart races, and the mind starts projecting every possible scenario. When I arrived, the scene was clear. Mr. Antonio was going into septic shock, and his body was no longer responding as we had hoped. The team mobilized immediately. Nurses, physiotherapists, technicians, each one took their role with precision, almost automatically. In moments like that, we realize how the ICU machinery works in perfect sync, but also how every detail can mean the difference between life and death. We began administering vasopressor drugs, increased oxygen support, adjusted antibiotics. We tried, within the arsenal medicine offers us, every possible resource. But with each passing minute, the situation grew worse. His blood pressure dropped, his heart rate became unstable, and his skin began to grow cold. His body was announcing that it was reaching its limit, and deep down, I knew we had reached the moment where science no longer offered any guarantees. I remember looking at Dona Maria's eyes. She was still there, firm by the bed, even without being able to touch her husband due to the procedures. She searched in me for an answer, for hope, but I had to be honest. "We are doing everything possible," I said with a firm voice, though my heart was heavy. "But his condition is extremely delicate." Inside, I knew those words were the softened translation of something much harsher. We were losing the battle, and losing a patient is not just a statistic, not just another line in a medical chart. It is the feeling that all the science, all the technique, all the years of study suddenly weren't enough. It is facing life's fragility in its cruelest form. While the team kept fighting, adjusting medications, and monitoring every heartbeat, the clock seemed to speed up. Minutes turned into seconds, and every second weighed like a ton. There was a moment when the heart monitor beeped louder, and we saw the trace turn into a severe arrhythmia. Mr. Antonio's heart no longer beat with strength. We began resuscitation maneuvers. Chest compressions started. The room was filled with an indescribable tension. Every movement was calculated, every command spoken loudly, as if the sound of words could keep hope alive. "Adrenaline now," I ordered. The drug was given, and everyone held their breath for a few seconds. The trace returned, but fragile, intermittent, like a flame about to go out. At that moment, reality hit hard. Medicine had done everything it could. I looked at the progress chart, at the exams, at the team's eyes. We all knew that, under normal conditions, Mr. Antonio's life was coming to an end. And it was then that the weight of silence fell over everyone. There were no more commands, no more rushing, only the cold realization we had reached the limit. I approached the family, took a deep breath, and with the serenity the profession demands, I said, "We are facing an irreversible condition." Tears came, inevitable. The muffled cries of those who did not want to believe. The pain of accepting that this might be the last time they would see that man. And even though my voice was firm, inside me something screamed, "Is it really over? Is there truly nothing beyond what we see on monitors and test results?" It was the peak of the crisis. The moment when medicine admits its helplessness. But I didn't know, and no one there knew, that this would not be the end of the story. Something completely unexpected was about to happen. The ICU clock read just after 3 in the morning. These were the quietest hours when even the hospital seems to hold its breath. Mr. Antonio's body, already without meaningful responses, was being sustained by the team's last efforts. The heart monitor displayed a faint trace, almost non-existent, as if his life were a thin thread about to break. I was standing by the bed, clipboard in hand. No matter how much I tried to maintain medical objectivity, there was something different in that scene. The atmosphere felt heavy, as if an invisible energy circulated among us. I felt the weight on my shoulders, the responsibility, but also a strange impression that it was not yet time to give up. And then, it happened. While everyone expected the inevitable outcome, a sudden change appeared on the monitor. The cardiac trace, which had been fading little by little, gained an unexpected impulse. At first timid, then stronger, as if Mr. Antonio's heart had found strength from an unknown place. The nurse at my side widened her eyes. "Doctor, the rhythm is coming back," she said, almost in disbelief. I looked at the monitor and saw the heart rate rising gradually, still fragile, but consistent. At the same time, his oxygen saturation, which had been dangerously low, began to stabilize. The numbers, which just minutes earlier had announced the end, now showed signs of life. No one in that room could explain it. There had been no new intervention, no miracle drug administered at that moment. Everything we had done had already been in place for hours. The only difference was this: an unexpected return, a breath of life where science had already declared the opposite. Our eyes met. Doctors, nurses, technicians. All of us were used to critical situations, but what we witnessed that dawn escaped all logic. It was as if a higher force had decided to intervene. His wife, Donna Maria, who had been silently praying in the corner, noticed the movement. She lifted her head, looked at the monitor, and with tears streaming down her face whispered, "I knew it. I knew God wouldn't take him now." A profound silence followed, a silence not of despair, but of reverence. The team kept monitoring, adjusting parameters, checking vital signs, but the truth is that none of us had a rational explanation for it. Mr. Antonio, who moments earlier seemed to have crossed the final line, was now breathing with more stability, and his heart showed a vitality that no one expected. It was like watching a flame that refuses to go out. And as I looked at that man, I realized that medicine, in that moment, had become nothing more than a spectator. The night went on with everyone attentive, vigilant, but also shaken. Because even in the ICU, where the coldness of numbers dictates our actions, everyone there knew we were witnessing something that went beyond protocols. As a doctor, I had to keep my professional posture, record the data, guide the team. But inside me, a voice insisted, "This is not just science. Something greater is happening here." And that was only the first twist. Because although the return of Mr. Antonio's heartbeat had already shocked us all, what happened next would be even more impressive and even harder to explain. The return of his vital signs had already left the team in disbelief, but while we tried to process what was happening, new events began to unfold before our eyes, as if reality itself were being challenged. In the minutes following that improbable cardiac recovery, his oxygen saturation, which had stubbornly remained dangerously low despite the ventilator at maximum support, began to rise slowly. It was as if his fragile, infected lungs were reorganizing themselves in a way that medicine cannot explain. From 70%, it went to 78%, then 85%. In just over 15 minutes, the monitor registered 92%. For those familiar with ICU care, such a jump in a case so advanced is simply unbelievable. The head nurse looked at me, searching for an explanation. "Doctor, this doesn't make sense," she said quietly, almost afraid of breaking the enchantment of that moment. I shook my head, unable to find words. Because she was right. There was no logic. And as if that weren't enough, something even more striking happened. Mr. Antonio, still sedated and unconscious, began to move his fingers slightly. At first, I thought it was just a reflex, something common in critical patients. But soon, the movements became clearer, firmer, as if he were trying to signal his presence. His eyes, still closed, showed slight contractions in the eyelids. His breathing, once completely dependent on the machine, seemed to want to follow its own rhythm. The team looked at each other incredulous. Impossible, he wouldn't have the strength for that, one of the residents murmured. But the impossible was happening. At that moment, Dona Maria, his wife, stepped forward, still with tears in her eyes, and said in a firm voice, "I told you he would come back. He promised me he wouldn't leave me alone." Her words echoed inside me. It wasn't just faith, it was conviction. While we, doctors, looked at exams and numbers, she looked beyond, at something that surpassed every boundary of science. And then came the climax of that night. Without warning, without explanation, Mr. Antonio slowly opened his eyes. It wasn't a full awakening, of course, but enough for everyone in the room to hold their breath. His eyes moved, focused for a few seconds, and then a single tear rolled down his face. I didn't know if it was a neurological reflex, a minimal reaction, or something more, but in that instant, the entire team fell into absolute silence, as if no one dared to speak for fear of breaking the mystery we were witnessing. My heart, even after so many years of practice, raced. I had seen difficult cases, witnessed impressive recoveries, but nothing compared to this. His body, condemned by medical protocols, was reacting in an inexplicable way. And to complete the picture, the lab results we had collected earlier began to show signs of improvement. The infection, which had spread like fire, seemed to start receding. The inflammatory markers, which should have continued rising, were dropping. It was as if an invisible force had begun to act inside that body. I don't know if you, listening to me now, have ever been in a situation where reason and emotion collide directly, but that is exactly what I felt that night. Reason screamed that this was impossible, that the data contradicted everything we had learned, but emotion, and perhaps even spirituality, told us we were witnessing a miracle. What happened to Mr. Antonio that night didn't end there. That was only the beginning of a sequence of events that left us all without answers. And with every passing hour, the sense that something extraordinary was unfolding only grew stronger. The third day after that unforgettable night was marked by a completely different atmosphere in the ICU. The hallways, usually heavy with tension, felt lighter. Even the staff, accustomed to the hospital's relentless pace, whispered that the case in bed 7 was something they would never forget. Mr. Antonio, who according to every prediction should already have passed away, now showed clear signs of recovery. Still fragile, still dependent on medical support, but alive. And not just alive, present. He could already keep his eyes open for longer periods, move his hands, and even respond with small gestures to the questions we asked. I remember a very specific moment that marked me deeply. During the morning visit, I leaned toward his bed and said, "Mr. Antonio, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand." With effort, he did. It wasn't strong, but it was firm enough to silence everyone around. That simple gesture carried immense weight. It was living proof that, against all odds, he was back. The family, of course, was overwhelmed with emotion. Dona Maria never left his side, rosary still in her hands. But now her prayers had a different tone. They were no longer desperate pleas, but words of gratitude. The children, emotional, took turns telling stories, speaking words of affection as if every sound could strengthen his bond with life. The impact extended to the staff as well. Many professionals, even the most experienced, felt they were living through something extraordinary. A nurse confided to me in the hallway, "Doctor, I never believed in miracles, but after what I've seen these last few days, I think I'll have to reconsider." Others whispered, still trying to come up with medical explanations but without conviction. And it wasn't only his clinical improvement that impressed us. There was a different atmosphere around that bed. Anyone who entered the room felt something indescribable. It wasn't just hope. It was a nearly tangible sense that we were in the presence of something greater than us. On the 4th day, we decided to gradually reduce sedation. His body responded well. His heart maintained a stable rhythm. His blood pressure held steady without so many medications. And his lungs, though still fragile, managed to work with less machine support. That's when we witnessed one of the most emotional scenes. With a voice still hoarse, weak but audible, Mr. Antonio managed to clearly pronounce 2 words. "Thank you, God." Tears came instantly. Nurses, doctors, family members, all were overwhelmed by indescribable emotion. It didn't matter if each person had their own faith. belief, or even skepticism. Those words resonated as a testimony that no science could erase. I, as a doctor, felt divided between the professional and the human. I had to keep the records, plan the next steps. But inside I felt that this man was not just surviving, he was being reborn. And what impressed us most was that this recovery wasn't just physical. As the days went by, he showed a lucidity that surprised us. Despite the fragility of his body, his mind seemed clear, connected, as if he had crossed into something profound and returned with a new strength. At one point, looking at his wife, he said, "I saw you praying for me. I felt you." Donna Maria burst into tears. We doctors didn't know how to interpret those words. But one thing was certain. For him, that experience had been very real. The peak of Mr. Antonio's recovery went beyond clinical parameters. He was touching everyone around him, reminding us that even surrounded by technology and knowledge, we are still small in the face of life's mystery. But there was still more to be revealed. The true impact of this story would not end with his clinical improvement. What came next would transform not only his life and his family's, but also the way we, doctors, nurses, professionals, came to see what it really means to fight for life. When I think about that story today, even after so many years of practice, I still feel chills run through my body. Medicine taught me to value numbers, to trust exams, to rely on the knowledge accumulated by science. But the experience with Mr. Antonio showed me something no school, no book, no statistic can teach. There are moments when life simply decides to write its own story. As a doctor, I found myself in a dilemma. On one hand, scientific logic told me that everything we had witnessed could be interpreted as coincidence, as a set of extremely rare factors that, by chance, aligned. That is, after all, how science tries to make sense of what it doesn't understand. On the other hand, there was what my eyes had seen and what my heart had felt. A man who, by the rules of medicine, should no longer have been with us, stood up to death and returned to life in an inexplicable way. And I wasn't the only one who felt this. The entire team present in that ICU was marked by that episode. Each of them carried away a memory that will never fade. Some became more open to spirituality. Others began to value more the presence of families, their prayers, the faith that so often accompanies patients. Because we realized that the fight for life doesn't happen only in the body, but also in the soul. Mr. Antonio's family, in turn, always saw what happened as a miracle. And to be honest, I cannot deny it. Whether it was a religious miracle, a spiritual one, or simply a phenomenon of life we still don't understand, it doesn't really matter. What truly matters is what this event awakened in all of us. The awareness that there are forces beyond our control, and that life itself is the greatest mystery of all. I learned something essential from that episode. Medicine is a powerful tool, but it is not absolute. It can prolong, it can heal, it can transform, but it must also recognize its limits. And within those limits, we often find space for the unexplainable. That is where the moments we call miracles arise. And I want you, listening to me now, to reflect with me. How many times in your life have you faced situations where everything seemed lost, where there was no way out? Maybe not inside an ICU, but in other areas, at work, in your family, in your health, in your relationships. And then, suddenly, something unexpected happened. A detail, a change, a breath of hope that turned everything upside down. Perhaps those moments are the reminder that we never have complete control, that life always keeps a card up its sleeve. In telling this story, I don't just want to move you. I want to inspire you. I want to remind you that even in the darkest days, there can be light. Even when everyone says it's the end, there can be a new beginning. I am still a doctor. I still believe in and practice science with dedication. But today, after that experience, I walk with greater humility, because I know that no matter how clear the exams may be, there is something beyond them, something that cannot be measured in numbers, but in faith, in hope, in love. And maybe that is what truly makes us human, the ability to believe, to be surprised, and to recognize that not everything needs to be explained, because sometimes simply, the miracle happens. This was the true story of Mr. Antonio, a simple man, but one who taught us something far beyond medicine. In that ICU, among machines, monitors, and protocols, we learned that life is not limited to what science can measure. Sometimes it insists on manifesting itself in unexpected ways, defying every statistic and reminding us that there is something greater, whether you call it faith, spirituality, or simply mystery. I, as a doctor, keep every detail of that event not only in my memory, but also in my heart, because it showed me that even in the face of finitude, we must never underestimate life's ability to surprise us. And more than that, it taught me to look at every patient as someone who carries not only a body and treatment, but also a story, a soul, and often an invisible strength that cannot be explained in reports. If this story touched you in any way, I ask you to leave a like on this video. That simple gesture helps it reach more people who also need to hear a message of hope. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, click the subscribe button right now. Here, I will continue sharing real accounts, lived inside hospitals, that unite science and emotion, technique and humanity, reason and mystery. But there is something even more important: your participation. At the beginning of this video, I asked you to write in the comments, "I believe in miracles," and many of you already did. Now I want to propose another challenge. If this story moved you, write in the comments what was the most emotional moment for you. Want to know how each detail resonated in your heart? Your voice is a fundamental part of this community, because this channel doesn't exist just to tell stories, but to create a space for reflection and connection. And don't think it ends here. I still have many other stories to share, some even more surprising than this one. Accounts that will once again take you inside the hospital, into the behind the scenes that few people know, where life and death meet every second. In the next video, I will bring something that I am certain will capture your attention from the very first minute. I can't reveal the theme now, but I can guarantee you won't want to miss it. So, before you leave, do 3 simple things that help this channel a lot. Leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. And remember, share this video with someone you think needs to hear this message. Sometimes a story like this arrives at just the right moment to rekindle hope in someone who has no strength left. Life is full of mysteries, and sometimes we are privileged to witness one of them. I witnessed this miracle, and today I shared it with you. And who knows, in the next video I may bring you another story capable of touching your soul and making you reflect on the greatness of existence. Thank you for staying with me until the end. And never forget, no matter how hard the night, a new day can always dawn.